Hello and welcome to episode 110 of the Cutie Art Crusaders for August 19th, 2014. My name is Rainbow Plasma. I'm the organizer and this week's editor of the podcast, and today I'm joined by...
Flutterguy317. I'm the media manager for the podcast.
And Atmospark, I'm finally back. I do the questions, the deviant art, and sometimes the other stuff.
What a great way to come back there. I
started a little bit.
Yeah. Did your brain wander off or something?
I think it did.
Yeah. So, welcome back, Joel. It's good to have you back on. It's been like a month.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because
I don't think I've recorded for I definitely haven't done it in the last 2 weeks.
Were you on the Saoshin episode?
Yeah, I was there for that one. I think it was the last one I was there for.
Yeah. So you were there for the Saoshin, but then we took the week off.
Yeah.
Because of BronyCon, and then we had the BronyCon episode.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, so it's been 2 weeks for me. Well, how long has it been since all four of us were here? Was somebody missing for the Saoshin episode?
No, I don't think so. We were all there.
We were all there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, luckily, Bernd is away today, so that it doesn't mean that we end up talking over you too much. Hopefully, so you can get some ample FaceTime now that you're back on the podcast, and it's good to have you back.
Yeah. I don't have an eye anything. I can't do FaceTime.
Yeah. So Bernd is away. I believe he is busy today. That's basically it.
Family stuff. I think. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, that's fine, and it works out because I'm editing, so I get to wade through this mess a couple times, and yeah. So it's funny. I was actually thinking while I was doing the intro, because we do the same kind of intro since the very beginning. I don't remember where we kind of came up with it, but we made a conscious decision to do that intro where we introduced ourselves and kind of helped. I guess it was to help people familiarize themselves with their voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but it's actually worked out really well because it's almost like, now that a lot of people who listen to the podcast have familiarized themselves with our voices, it's also a way to kind of let people know who's going to be on this week.
Yeah.
You know?
And we also fade out the face and stuff, so.
Yeah. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wanted to give a shout out this week to you, Ted, because you have been going pretty hardcore this week. Ever since you left on Sunday, I've been kind of out of it, and I've had to work on a project, so I haven't had a lot of time. And I know Bernd's computer imploded last weekend.
Yeah, I have no idea. So basically, Bernd was talking to me about his computer issues, and I guess Windows no longer thinks it's genuine on his PC or whatever, so he doesn't have access to all his memory. So rendering takes forever. So last week, we got the episode to Everfree late, because it took forever to render, and then they were having issues like they normally do with live streams, so I ended up having to stream it off of a virtual machine on my Linux system, a Windows virtual machine, and it was awful, but it worked, so yeah. But then I've also been kind of editing and uploading all of our artist interviews and our press conferences to our YouTube channel, so go check them out if you haven't seen them already.
Yeah, awesome. It was really awesome of you to step up. I know, I know Bernd would have loved to do that, but his computer troubles. I'm not too huge on doing that because the stuff, the videos that we do at BronyCon have never been hugely my thing. And I've also been really busy this week, so going back to work and all that kind of jazz. So it was really awesome for you to kind of come up and do that, because it's really nice to wake up and be like, oh look, that's done. I don't have to do that.
Yeah,
so,
well, I mean, I know Bernd's having computer issues, and we had some trouble getting him some video files, because they were massive, and your upload speed is pretty bad.
We didn't think about it in advance, but it ended up working out pretty well this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he got me his footage, and we were able to kind of splice it together, so...
Yeah. So how many of them are up, and how many are there to go?
I believe we have all of our artist interviews up, and I am not sure how many that was, but it was quite a few. 9 interviews up, I believe.
Okay.
With artists, and we have 2 press conferences up so far, and I believe there's 2 to go. We also uploaded a panel from Artist Palooza, which was it was a panel of 5 artists, I believe, different types of artists, and they were just basically talking about art and stuff. So it's cool.
Yeah, I don't think we were originally like really planning to put that one out yet, especially because
Yeah.
our footage was like we kind of just did it last minute because we thought it'd be fun, and like our
Yeah.
footage was kind of bad because one of the like staff members stood in front of the camera like half the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think someone on the panel requested that if anybody had footage that they could put it up. So we
Yeah.
did that, and yeah, there's two more. Is it going to be out by the time you think that this video is going to go out?
Possibly. I have to figure it out because Burn didn't capture any footage with that, and so I have to kind of do some editing with it. But
Okay.
we'll see. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But most of the videos are up now, so go check them
Yes.
out on youtube.com/Cutie Art Crusaders. Again, the press conferences and the artist interviews both went really, really well. I'm partial to the press conferences myself, but go check them out. All of the stuff out on our channel.
Yep.
Cool.
Do it.
All right. So we were kind of struggling with a theme for this week, but we came up with something that was kind of cool, and I think we've been planning it ever since the finale of season 4, which is the Golden Oaks Library, because it is a very beloved and cherished landmark in Ponyville, but sadly got destroyed at
Gone.
the end of season 4. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It got exploded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the thing about that too was like it. I was really immersed in the episode. It was a two-parter for the end, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes,
I'd already watched like half an hour of it, and I was already watching through most of that second episode, and it was just at the end of the fight scene when the library gets destroyed. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched season 4.
Yeah.
So how is it under your rock?
Yeah, really. Say hi to Mod. They wouldn't get that reference either. So yeah, kind of when it happened at the time, I was like, wow, that was quite spectacular. But then like the rest of the show went on and the show ended, and I was like, oh, that was really cool, blah blah blah. And then like it didn't hit me until like someone posted on Reddit being like, by the way, like the most common setting in the entire show just got destroyed. Did anybody else
Yeah.
notice? And it's like, oh yeah, that's a really big deal.
The first time I watched the episode, it really hit me actually. Like, that was the closest thing to losing one of the main 6 that we've had.
Yeah, like a big character.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the library. It's yeah, it's home.
Yeah, so we've kind of got like we kind of did kind of a fun order today. We try to order things sometimes on the show, but this one we tried to kind of order from like beginning to end almost.
Yeah. So our first piece is called Golden Oaks Updated by Noyuni. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this piece is basically the Golden Oaks Library at night. It looks like maybe it's a dawn or a sunset. And it's very like Photoshop realistic kind of looking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I picked this one. I fought for this one to get in there.
Yeah.
I
You
really
wanna-
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say some words about it.
Yay.
I
Words.
really like this. I'm not too sure what it is about it that I like so much, but it might just be the combination of sort of the kind of hyper-realism plus the lighting, I
Mhm.
guess. Because I feel the lighting is done really well. Like the light from this picture is coming from the tree, like from the inside of the tree,
Yeah.
which is, as we know, the library. So Twilight's in there doing something, and there's light coming out of it. And that sort of, I don't know what it is. Normally having it looks almost like a photograph. Normally having the subject of the photo in the middle isn't the best thing to do because it distracts you a bit. Normally having it on the sort of off to the side is better. But this, I don't know why, this seems to work really, really well for me.
Yeah, it produces a little bit of symmetry, and while the off-centered thing is a very valid point, we as people also really, really like symmetry. And so when it's placed very carefully to be right in the middle, then we do also get this sense of like, ooh, nice kind of split between. It's not a perfect symmetry, so it doesn't look unnatural, but it's kind of like a natural symmetry there in the way that the picture is framed.
Well, and you were talking about the lighting too, and I think that kind of brings your eye in as a focal point. So,
Well,
Yeah.
actually, the light's coming from like the middle inside the tree.
hmm
Then you got, oh look, there's Aloysius on the side there. That's cool.
yeah,
I didn't see that at first.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you were right. It does go for this kind of realistic feel, but there's almost like a contrast between the scene itself and then the way that each of the individual details are portrayed, because you were mentioning if you look underneath the tree. I mean, if you look very closely at the tree, you can see it as well. But I think the most obvious point is when you look underneath the tree, you can see all of the roots, and it, like you said, it looks like a photograph. It looks very, very realistic, and for all I know, maybe they took photos and kind of mashed them together, which would be a cool concept. But you have that, but then the scene itself is quite exaggerated and fantastical. The tree is by itself, even though there should be a city around it. So I just hit my desk. And so there should be other houses around it or whatever. But it's not. It's kind of in the middle of this mystical, misty grove of sorts where there's, lots of, mountains in the background, which is crazy. We don't see that, and this light coming off from behind the background with these crazy different colors, almost like a sunrise or an aurora borealis. So it's and the light itself from inside the house is not the typical kind of light that you would see. It's very blooming. It's very, very bright. And it's almost like shooting out of the library. So you have this kind of contrast between the realism of the details, but the kind of fantasy aspect and the non-realism of the scenario itself.
I do like the juxtaposition of like the realistic or hyper-realistic textures on the tree and the roots and the whole cliff face, kind of against the atmospheric perspective and the lighting rays and stuff, because those are they're not really painterly, but they're not as realistic, I feel, as like the textures used on the tree and the roots.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting mixture of real versus not quite so real. But I like it. It's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, it's funny because I think atmospheric perspective is something that can be taken a little bit loosely. I would actually disagree that this is atmospheric perspective.
Yeah,
I think
fog,
actually,
mist.
yeah, there's more of like I think atmospheric perspective is something that's like there is no additional tangible thing. It's just that it's farther away, and that's why it looks faded. Whereas here, it looks like there's very tangible kind of mist rising off the ground. That being said, if you take away the mist, I can't speak today. If you take away the mist and you look at the mountains themselves in the background, I think there's probably still some atmospheric perspective on there, and it kind of gives the same feel. It does separate it and push those back. So, even if it isn't perfectly atmospheric perspective, it still gives the same kind of feeling.
Yeah. I agree. And even like in the name atmospheric perspective, there's perspective. So it is like what you say, basically. It's things that are in the background tend to have this mistiness to them because they're farther away. But, yeah. I do like atmospheric. I like those rays that you brought up of light kind of emanating from the tree, because it definitely adds to that whole like, I don't want to say surreal, but like, the situation is very fantastical, and I think those rays of light kind of add to that quite a bit. Yeah. Also, not to get too dark, but you were mentioning that there's no Ponyville there, and there's a giant cliff face. Maybe there was a kind of a disaster of sorts.
Yeah, or it might be a combination of new and old. Something like this was before Ponyville, but then for the tree itself, it's taken into the future of what it will become. But the scenario around it is from before the town went up.
Yeah, could be. Maybe like the library has been there since the beginning. Maybe that was like the first building or quote unquote building that they had in Ponyville.
Yeah.
Before everything else came.
Well, I'm sure if you see it's funny because if you were walking in the middle of a field and there's this huge giant tree, would you not want to build around it as well?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking, my brain just went to Minecraft, and I was like, if I saw that, then I think that would be a cool place to start a town.
Yeah. So speaking of Minecraft, we have now. There are quite a few. If you look up Golden Oaks Library on DeviantArt, there's quite a few Minecraft versions.
Oh, you're actually going on the Minecraft thing. Okay.
Yeah.
There is a lot of Minecraft stuff on there.
Yeah.
So I've had a look at this thing in like the full detail, which is like 3,000 by something, and I've discovered that this picture is actually literally pictures of trees and ground and stuff merged together in Photoshop to make this.
Yeah.
So
Even-
it's not, and like pieces of stuff drawn on or photoshopped into it.
Even
Yeah.
even
So,
the
like-
leaves themselves.
Even the leaves themselves. It's all come from various pictures of trees.
Interesting. So it's almost like a new age Photoshop collage of sorts.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
really cool.
there are some parts that could have been done better, but it's overall, it does, like, if you're not looking at it in full detail, like zooming in real close, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think the cool thing is too, like if that is, if these are a bunch of different leaves that are being put together, the fact that, all of this came out and it looks like golden oaks, right? So I think that's a pretty cool thing to be able to do, to take a bunch of different pictures of leaves, put them together and make it seem completely natural.
Mm-hmm.
And it does kind of fit. Like you said, I think there's a couple points in here that now that you mention it do kind of stand out a little bit, but I like it. It's kind of like a newer or a less common, an unusual way to make a digital art piece. But it came out, I think, really well, like you said.
Yeah. It's like photoshopping things to the max, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To the max.
Yeah, but again, kind of also combining other digital painting elements in as well.
Yeah.
Because some of this is created by the artist.
Be really neat just thinking on the whole sky with the stars. And this is just coming out of nowhere. But to see some sort of like spray paint version of this piece, like using actual spray paint, because I know like a lot of spray painters do these kind of fantastical, mostly like planetary scenes, but like this would probably come out really cool. That was a completely off-topic tangent. Anyhow, I think we should move on to our next piece, which is called "End of a Golden Age" by Assassin Monkey.
So
And-
here's the actual moment itself. We started with the before, and now we're right in the middle.
This is the splitty splitty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Them
is what you
explosions.
came to see. This is the big show. The big show.
Kaboom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that explosion.
Mhm. Yeah.
one
it's
thing-
quite violent, isn't it?
Yeah. One thing I like that Assassin Monkey does really well is fire and explosions, or not fire, fire and motion, which is actually two things, I guess.
And
But,
the
like,
aspect ratio.
yeah. But he does a lot of really cool things with motion. For instance, the whole diagonal explosion coming up to the upper right side of the image. He's got a lot of like pieces flying off, and Twilight has this motion blur to her. Her like hair is
I
jostled.
was just gonna mention that the motion blur and that fire as well, and that explosion coming out behind her. If you like sit back and look at it, it's almost as if the picture is moving. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
whether you guys get that, but it looks like it's kind of moving backwards and forwards a little, a little bit. I
Yeah.
sneezed.
I'm glad you did that in the middle of your sentence, so I can't edit it out.
But yeah, like that is the way that he's done that with just the motion on that side of it really makes it look like it is exploding out that way. It makes Twilight look like she's moving.
Well, especially because her face is completely in focus, not really blurry at all, but the surroundings around her are blurry and her wings are blurry and stuff, so it definitely gives it that kind of feel that she's the main focus and like the rest of the piece is moving around her.
And not just moving either. I think it also is warping in a way as well. There's a lot of that you can see, especially near the top of the explosion, that things are kind of bending, and I think it's almost like this is almost like a camera shot with a really wide angle lens. You have a lot of warping. You have a lot of there's a lot of perspective on this, and it's very the only way I can describe it is with like a wide angle lens, and you get kind of this warping aspect when you look away from the explosion towards the tree itself.
Yeah, it's a fisheye basically.
Yeah, and even along the bottom as well, you can see that that things are kind of not, even if you were to, because obviously this is a diagonal, right? So the library itself is tilted to the left, but even if you were to turn this to the right and right the the library. There's still a lot of like warping going on in the structure of it, and part of that is obviously the energy of the explosion pushing outward, but part of it too is just kind of the perspective that we're given.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the perspective plays a lot into how we perceive the piece. Because if it wasn't warped, like, like through a lens, it wouldn't be quite as drastic, I feel, which is why I think you see a lot of like actiony, kind of like the whole skateboarder videos use those wide angle lenses, because they, it puts you in the setting. It gets you like kind of involved. And so this, I think, is kind of the same way, where like it puts you right into the action, and it kind of makes the explosion seem bigger, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would agree. I think that that kind of warping of it kind of gives the sense that it's very powerful. The explosion itself. Obviously, we see a lot of oranges and reds and yellows and stuff like that, and we see the chips of wood. But the warping also, it's like it's so powerful, it kind of warped reality for a second there before it kind of snaps back. And we're kind of catching that moment in time when the energy is at its highest.
Yeah. Yeah, I just noticed something, that the lantern that's on the post outside of her window, like, is completely at a diagonal to the house. So obviously there's some force coming out of the window there and pushing it away.
Yeah. I think another interesting thing too is how the explosion, it's kind of hard to tell whether or not it's going in or coming out of the library. And I don't know, if that's just how I'm looking at it, but I often kind of default back into looking at it as it's coming out of the library.
Yeah.
And that's probably because the focus of this piece, Twilight, her emotion is very much away from the library. And because the explosion is kind of centered, that line going into the library of whatever that is, fire, is kind of framing around her. It kind of, the motion of her also conveys itself to the motion of that kind of section of fire as well. It's an interesting thing to note. I'm not sure if I'm totally on board with that, because, like I said, the fact that her motion is very clear and there's something behind her, it kind of gives me that impression that it's going the same way. But it's also tough too, because the entire piece is about this fireball that is hitting a certain point, and then you have one character that's jumping away, and because it's a still frame, you're kind of catching both right in the middle. So it's almost like they could go either way. It's very difficult to kind of tell.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting in the show because the library actually kind of, I think, absorbed the energy before it kind of exploded, if I'm remembering correctly. So you didn't get both the explosion and the whole like fire beam at the same time. But in this piece, it looks like you kind of get both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I wanted to talk about in this piece that Assassin Monkey does really well with his fire is the use of colors, and just the use of like these blobs of different colors. Because like if you look at his fire, it's mainly based around like a very bright yellow, but there's all these kind of oranges in there and reds, and it kind of gives some what's the word? Well, it like brings to life some debris in the fire, and like I know he's done a lot with like sparks before in the past, and you can see some of them here. It's very painterly, and it's very nice to look at.
Yeah. Assassin Monkey also kind of is bringing in a lot of digital aspects. In our last piece, we saw a lot of kind of new age Photoshop kind of techniques in the way that the picture was kind of cut together and merged. And in here we see a lot of those digital techniques too in what I know, Joel, you were talking about before, the motion blur, and all of that kind of stuff happening. And there's a lot of that blur. That streak in the top right-hand corner of fire is very, very blurry, which is an interesting choice because it takes up a quarter of the screen, and it really kind of is jarring in a way, not in a bad way, but it is definitely like whoa, because it's a quarter of the screen and it's blurred. and there are these subtle pieces. So obviously we are attracted to the right hand side of the screen, and on the left hand side of the screen there's lots of little pieces that are blurred quite heavily, to indicate fast moving pieces that are coming off of the library. And because we don't focus on them, they kind of disappear a bit, but still convey that large amount of motion.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't even notice those until you pointed them out. What also is interesting to me is that, like, when you're talking about level of detail, if you look at the background on the left side is a lot more detailed than the background on the right side. Like there's a kind of a tree,
because there's barely even a background on the right side.
Yeah. And I think that's because if you're looking towards the right, your eye's more drawn to Twilight. And if you're looking on the left, obviously you have the entire tree in there. So it's kind of cool. It's like dual points of focus, I think. Almost. Yeah. Anyone else have anything to say about this piece other than the fact that it's awesome?
I've just added it to my wallpapers folder.
Well, there you go. That's about as close as you can get as an approval from any of us.
Atmospark approved.
Yes, you can put a big stamp on that one.
I just wanted to take a moment to talk about, because this is the piece that like happened during the destruction, to talk about the actual scene in the movie.
The show.
Or in the show. Thanks. Yeah. I am also losing my brain today. I don't know. I felt like it was really well timed out, and I feel like emotionally, like it kind of yeah. I have no idea where I'm going with this, actually.
All right, so our next art piece.
Sorry. You can cut that out if you want. Or you can leave it in and make me...
The more you talk, the more I'm going to leave it in, so keep going there, pony boy.
All right, so our next piece is called Destruction by Adawan, who we have never featured on the show before. But
that's a dangerous claim.
I don't think that we have. But he has quite a few more abstract pieces, and this is not an exception to that. Yeah, this is a very abstract piece of the Golden Oaks Library after it was destroyed.
Like
Yeah. And yeah, so basically, I know Byrne can talk more about abstract art, but I believe that it involves a lot of just shapes to represent things and colors.
I mean,
know.
like it's very vague because it's it is lacking in a lot of detail in a lot of certain areas. It doesn't have finer details. I'm not sure if I would agree that this is abstract, because abstract,
I don't think so.
Abstract, you can still very much tell what's happening here. You can still tell the subject. You can still tell what's coming out with this, with the smoke out of the library, and maybe at first, the first time you look at it, you're like, what is that? And then you kind of register it. But yeah, I don't know the correct art terminology for this. Perhaps it's more of like a surrealist. Again, I don't know that for sure. But what I do know is it kind of fits in with a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about in this episode, and that it's very, very modern, and it's very, very digital. It has these kind of blocky feet. It's almost like what you'd see in like one of those paper shadow boxes. You know, it's like clean cut lines. But the colors themselves, there's a lot of gradients within them. So even though you have these blocky lines, it's smoothed out by these gradients, but the gradients themselves aren't shared between the different blocks. So there's kind of it still keeps that hard edge. It's a really interesting kind of style, and I haven't seen anything quite like that before. So that it really stood out to me as something that I looked at as quite new and interesting.
Yeah.
I agree. I wouldn't call this abstract, I don't think.
I mean, I think there's varying levels of abstract art, and I think like what you normally refer to as abstract art is a lot more just shapes and lines and colors, and like away from the actual subject of the piece than what this is. But I wouldn't hesitate to call this slightly abstract. I don't know.
It's interesting, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it is interesting.
I guess there's a slight bit of abstraction in there, but
you can definitely
think
tell
that's more
what
of the
the
medium.
subject is. Yeah, you can definitely tell what the subject is. You can tell it is the library. But I, like you guys were saying, I do like the style, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. It does very much remind me of a shadow box kind of thing.
Yeah, paper stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, and I do like how they use gradients on certain blocks to kind of separate them out from other ones. Like if you look, well, geez, in the upper right portion, there is a block that has a gradient on it, which kind of separates it out from, I guess, itself to kind of give it more of a 3D feel.
Yeah, and I think that 3D feel is something that's relevant, not just because of obviously we've got these gradients that one of these blocks will start with like a really light color and fade to dark, and on the other side it starts at dark and it fades to light, and that part where those two meet creates a very solid line, and that line helps things pop forward or backwards. I know to the kind of right side of the piece there's darker pieces, and then behind it there's almost like a little drop shadow, and it kind of pops the first one forward.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of other aspects that really bring out the 3D feel as well. Not just contrast, but also there's some on the left-hand side there are much less pieces. God, that sentence had no grammar. There aren't a lot of pieces, and these pieces in the background are very thick, but they're also angled in an interesting way. So there's ones that are angling up and ones that are angling down, and it almost looks like they're folded backwards. And then a lot of these diagonal lines coming into the library, and again, there's that really 3D feel I feel just left of the library that makes it kind of, I don't know, once your brain kind of looks at that and registers that as 3D, it kind of translates its way all the way on to the rest of the piece, and the rest of the piece starts popping a little bit more, and there's also just those kind of white flecks of paper. I think it's supposed to be interpreted as all the papers that was in Twilight's library with the books and her research and stuff. And they're kind of floating down and also on the ground. But the ones that are floating down really, really pop forward and push everything else back. You can see that they're placed very deliberately. So the ones on the right-hand side are placed over that house. The one the biggest one, so it's kind of on the left-hand side, is placed not only in front of the background, but also in front of a piece of the library, so it pushes the library back. The ones that's straight down from there, that's kind of folded, is in front of the kind of flowers, the bushes, so it pushes those back. All of them are very deliberately placed, and they all serve a purpose in order to help make this piece 3D.
The thing with sort of papercraft or stuff like this that almost looks like papercraft is you have to be pretty deliberate and pretty careful with your sort of shadows to make it look 3D, to make it look like stuff is overlapping. You see it a fair bit when people do like lineless vector art, and they make it look like papercraft. You got to be pretty deliberate with your shadowing.
Yeah,
and I think this does it pretty well.
Yeah.
One of the cool things that you can do with this kind of stuff is, I think that artists oftentimes will sacrifice a certain level of realism. Well, obviously they do in this piece, but like, for example, in the lighting, there are certain aspects of the lighting that make sense. For example, there's more lighting towards the center where there's a fire, and then you get less as it goes away. But the edges that are lit up are almost random in a way in order to make them kind of jut out against each other and give that level of contrast. And where these pieces of lighting go are almost kind of random on the sides of different cubes. Like just up and to the right of the door, there's two pieces. One of them's got light on the top right-hand side of the corner, and the other one's got light on the bottom left-hand side of the corner, and they're right next to each other. So you sacrifice this realism of where the lighting is going in order to create these contrasts between these pieces. And then, you can keep the realism, like I said, more of them are closer there, but where the light is actually going is kind of almost random. Like it's almost like it's poking out through the background through slits in the paper.
But again, it is done very deliberately to kind of give it that effect.
Absolutely.
I think I think that's kind of a really neat aspect of these more surrealistic pieces, is that you can play with those kind of things, like lighting and the shadows and stuff like that, a little bit more than you could if you were trying for a more realistic piece. But you kind of have to stay consistent in how you go about doing it. So like the placement of the lighting is fairly random, but it's all deliberate and it's all done like on one side of the block or whatever like that. And I feel like that kind of ties the piece together. Just the fact that like the lighting is random but consistent, I guess.
Yeah.
It is kind of an interesting style choice though. Very cool.
I really enjoy it. I think it's very. I think it speaks to me as being very modern.
Mm-hmm.
And
I also really enjoy this one. I might add this one to my wallpaper folder too.
I think the colors are an interesting choice as well, just because they're all kind of a similar kind of part of the they're all of a similar hue. They're all oranges and reds, and they're very similar. There's a little bit of green popping out. Sorry, there's a little bit of green within the piece, but it doesn't really pop out that much to me. Not quite in the same way that you might see in other pieces that contain, greens and oranges as a contrast. I think that the other aspects of 3D that we talked about earlier play a much bigger part and kind of put the emphasis on color as a usage for 3D. It kind of pushes that to the background and doesn't make it quite as important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like. Go ahead.
I feel like they've been pretty clever with that. What you're saying, the green contrast and it's not popping out. They've been pretty clever with that because it's not brighter than anything else. The yellow there is the brightest part. The fire is the brightest part, and that sort of overshadows that darker green. So, and because that darker green is by that entrance to what is left of the library, so it's really dark there. That green doesn't stand out, so they've done pretty well with that.
Yeah. It's interesting because throughout the whole piece, I guess you could say that the value is more used for kind of giving it this 3D look instead of colors, which I guess is kind of the same in most pieces. But there isn't really that many contrasting colors throughout the whole piece. Like you have reds against yellows, which are kind of similar analogous colors. I mean, the biggest contrast you have is that green over the reds and the yellows, but it doesn't really pop because they chose the correct colors and the gradients and stuff.
Right.
So
right, yeah.
It's interesting. All right, we're going to move on to our last piece, which is called Out of the Ashes, A New Story to be Told by Husi. Mm-hmm. And this piece depicts way after the destruction of the library. There's a new tree growing in the middle, and Twilight is there and looking at it or looking up, something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we saw the beginning, we saw before, we saw a couple of pieces during, and then now we've got kind of the aftermath after the smoke has cleared. What is still left, and as Husi is kind of displaying here, not much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how there's like a little bit of a shrine almost on the left side. Like there's a bunch of candles. Maybe like to the lost books of the Golden Oaks Library or something.
Yeah. Well, it's quite. I think it's probably quite symbolic in the town. The library itself, it probably played a huge role in people's childhood. So.
It's probably the biggest, most prominent building as well.
Yeah.
Being the tree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Joel, I think that you would like this one because of the way that it kind of has an interesting perspective, that it's kind of looking up.
Yeah, so this is what I would call forced perspective, where you're on the ground looking up, making it look more bigger, more grandiose.
Mm-hmm.
This is what forced perspective. What I keep calling forced perspective isn't forced perspective. But
yeah.
I did a bit of research on it. This is forced perspective.
Yeah, it almost looks like a skyscraper.
Yeah, because in the actual show it's not that big, but it looks huge in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
also,
I think.
I like.
No, go ahead.
I just noticed it right then. He's put rings on the floor there, like tree rings.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, I think there's also a bit of the way that the perspective is immediately affecting us, because if you look at Twilight versus the door, she's much smaller. But I don't think that was a mistake on his part. I think that's just another kind of victim of the perspective, and it kind of shows you and tricks you into seeing it as the tree as being much larger.
The other thing that like the way that he's made the tree seem bigger is, I'm gonna be a little bit of a burn here, but the vanishing point for it is up the top of the screen rather than through the screen. So if you're looking at a landscape, or if you're looking at something, the vanishing point for it is way, way, way back in the distance. But with this, instead of being backwards, it's upwards.
Yeah.
So the tree gets thinner as it goes up, and that makes it look bigger.
And it makes the piece very vertical as well. Everything is kind of, again, going to that point. It almost makes like a triangle, but the tip of the triangle is off screen, and so you get kind of brought up. And this is the way that the piece kind of gets you to look at. You start at twilight, and then are just naturally brought up into the sky. And I think you can see out of the top of it as well. You can kind of see in the background there's a bit of like smoke. So you are seeing the top of the tree, but because of the way that it's not really explicitly said, it kind of seems like it could go on until it hits that tip of the vanishing point.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do like the fact that he left the vanishing point way off the top of the screen. I feel like that kind of adds to that whole forced perspective and does make the tree seem quite a bit bigger. But yeah, go on.
I was going to say, moving on from the perspective of it, I just wanted to say I think it's the only daytime scene that we've had of the tree this episode.
Yeah, that's
true.
I
like that because this is the day after. This is so that the fight happened at night and the explosion and the destruction happened at night. This is the morning of.
Well, it's probably more because of the seedling that's growing there, but I do get what you're saying.
Yeah, so this looks like a morning scene. This isn't like it's a morning scene. The light's coming through the windows onto her, and the little tree growing there. Yeah, but it symbolizes the new beginning.
Yeah, and there's a lot of symbolism in there as well with the new tree itself, right?
Yeah, I do like how Husi used this whole lighting and the whole like dusty lighting to kind of give it a more hopeful feel to it. So like you have some of these windows where the light is kind of streaming through, and also like the whole coloring contrast. Like if you look at the base of the tree, it's not charred. It's still like this oak wood color. And then if you go up, it's kind of charred, but that's kind of more of a fact that it's there. It's not like centered around the fact that the tree was burned. It's kind of more about the hope for future, this sapling that's growing there.
Right. And you were talking about coloring, and I really enjoy the coloring in this piece because he keeps everything very dull except for twilight, and to a certain extent the sapling. But for the most part, the only color that stands out to me in the piece is twilight, even though the door itself has some foliage on the top of it that's green. Everything else and the kind of vastness of the charred wood takes up so much of the piece that it is very much a browny, greeny, yellowy piece, and then you've got twilight right in the middle there that really stands out and kind of gives you this focal point to look at. So I enjoyed the fact that he didn't go too crazy with the colors, and he set a very obvious focal point.
Yeah, I do like it's not monochrome at all by any means, but it's if you took Twilight out, it would be very analogous as a piece, as a whole. And then Twilight doesn't necessarily pop out because she contrasts, but she's put in there so well that like she fits in with the scene, but she is a different color, and your eye is drawn to her because she is.
Yeah.
Also, I do like the fact that there is kind of, if you look at the library tree itself, like there is life still coming out of that. Like around the archway you mentioned, there's some leaves, and there's also like a little bit of a twig over on the right side. I don't know. I'm assuming that that's alive and growing. And so that kind of also drives home the whole meaning behind this piece. So it's kind of cool. I like it. I do like the fact that or basically how he created the charred wood, just by using this like very dark gray and then just like lines of lighter gray, especially if you look like towards the right side where you have that light streaming in. It's just like dashes of gray, but it definitely looks like charred wood.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like the stuff floating around in the air like ash.
Yeah.
Well, great job, Husi. Good way to end our little cycle there.
Yeah. So thus is the start and the fall of the Golden Oaks Library. Yeah.
All right.
Yay.
Well, that's our art for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I guess we should move on to the question section for the first time in like a month.
Yeah, right. All right, so I've got a couple questions. First one is, do you always read the description text of an art piece, and how important is it as part of your experience? By Datumne.
I like
That
this one.
guy.
This one's recent.
Mm.
So this one's kind of interesting because it kind of talks about the meta of art. When you post, art to somewhere, sometimes, like for example on DeviantArt, you are allowed to put it in the description. And the only thing that I have to really say about it, it's kind of off topic from the question, but to any artists out there, if you ever feel like you have to explain your art piece in the description, then you're probably doing something a little bit off, and you should think about why you have to explain something. Because I think oftentimes, people will make these fantastical scenarios, and then it just gets too abstract. So that's something that I would note about the descriptions. As for me, if I actually look at the description, I always do look at the descriptions, but it's never my first instinct. It's always an afterthought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, the only situation where I could see like adding a description to a piece because the piece itself doesn't describe it enough is with an actual abstract piece of art. But I'm not particularly a fan of abstract pieces of art, so I haven't really seen any that, where I would look at the description. But if I do find a piece of art that I like, I will go through and read the description because I want to find out more about like the inspiration to the piece and what it means to the artist and stuff.
Okay, see, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say pretty much exactly what you just said. This is why I like having like more than just two people on a podcast, because people have differing opinions. I pretty much will always read the descriptions. Like, I'll see the thing and I'll look at it like, hey, that's pretty cool, and then I'll think about it and like get my own assumptions from it, and then I'll read what the artist has to say about it. Sometimes it's just if it's just something like, I really hate this piece of work, I hate those descriptions. Then you don't need to put anything there if you just say, yeah, no, I don't like this. But if it's something that actually has like thought going into it, and they like it, and they put stuff in the description about it, then I get this insight into what the artist is thinking when they make this, like what you said, their inspirations and how they felt when they were making it. And sometimes I'll point out stuff that I missed. So if I'm looking at something and I just don't see it, sometimes it's there in the description, and I do read them, and I do find sometimes it is important to read the descriptions. They also often link, in the case of Assassin Monkey and a lot of people that watch our show, they put links in the description and that sort of thing as well, to other versions of it or how they made it and that sort of thing. So I'm of the opinion that the descriptions are important, depending on how well the description is written or what the content of the description is. Like, if it's just, I threw this together and I really don't like it, but I'm going to put it on DeviantArt anyway because I haven't done anything in 2 weeks. Those are crap.
Yeah, I agree. Those descriptions are awful.
Yeah.
Just don't do that.
Don't write that.
Don't do that. It's okay. First of all, you are never ever forced to do something. People aren't. People are not like don't get me wrong, people will probably be like, man, I haven't seen something from this person in a while if they really enjoy your art. But people are not knocking on your door to see your next art piece. So, and the second thing too is, God, like nothing makes me more like I'll look at an art piece, and like I said before, I look at the description as an afterthought, and I'll look at an art piece and be like, oh, that's really nice, and then the description is like, yeah, I hate it. It's like, well, great, now I do too. Like,
Right.
or I hate you because I thought it looked great, and now you're like, yeah, it looks bad, and it's almost like the artist is arguing with you about how you're supposed to feel about the art piece, because like I'll look at it and I'll be like, I really like that, and then sometimes you have art debates. We have it on the show sometimes. I'll like a piece, you won't like a piece, and we'll debate it back and forth. But I don't want to have that debate with the artist about their own work. It seems silly to me. And obviously I think there's a lot of artistic insecurity that goes around, and I understand that, and that's fine and all, but like from an objective point of view, those descriptions suck. That's just it. They do. And if you make descriptions like that, you should consider not doing that. Because it's almost like you're fighting with your viewers. Or sometimes it comes off like you're looking for attention.
Yeah.
So, careful.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely depends on, what's in the description. Like those kind of descriptions are terrible.
Which it's really funny because, all the, I mentioned the fact that I don't really take descriptions into account and it's an afterthought. And that's true from the art point of view, but I think there's more to things than just the art that we see, and I think that descriptions do have a definite effect, but whether or not it doesn't affect my view of the art, but it might affect my view of the artist, and then that might affect me looking at the art in the general, or making a decision to watch or follow or whatever, So it has an effect to me personally, not on the art, but I think it is important.
Well, and we all kind of have our own opinions about pieces, and like if you find a piece of art that you really like, you kind of come up with this story about the piece on your own, and you kind of like infer and analyze the piece on your own without the artist saying, this is what I did and this is why I did the piece.
Right.
And so it's kind of interesting to me, at least, to kind of get those two opinions, if like my personal opinion about the piece and then the artist's personal opinion about the piece, but more about like what went into the piece, what their inspiration was for it, and what it means to them, not like I just threw this up.
Right. Right. So is the second question a quick one, Joel?
Yeah, second one's a question.
Cool.
The second question is a quick one.
I hope the second one's a question.
It might just be a story. Okay, second one is a question, and it is a quick one. It's by Son and Blitz, and it's, you get the chance to ride on a dinosaur for free. Choose your dinosaur.
Oh God, we're actually doing this one? I thought that was a
Yes.
joke.
No,
Yes,
we're doing
we are
this
doing
one.
that one.
Pterodactyl, because flying.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet.
Fair enough.
I'm going to say an Apatosaurus because they were massive, and I feel like it would be awesome to ride on a massive Apatosaurus.
What about a thesaurus?
Was it? Isn't Apatosaurus like the dinosaurs that hipsters always point to, because it's like, it's not really a brontosaurus, it's actually an Apatosaurus?
Yes. Yeah, there is no such thing as a Brontosaurus.
Why am I not surprised?
You're speaking to somebody who uses Linux, so...
Like I said, why am I not surprised?
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't have an answer until I learned that velociraptors had feathers, and I think that's cool. I like feathers.
They're
So
today's chickens.
so I'm gonna say velociraptor.
Mm-hmm.
They evolved in today's chickens.
Cool.
Which
You
is
would go around...
kind of sucky for a velociraptor.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm not becoming a chicken. Or having a chicken. I'm having a velociraptor.
Don't have a cow, man.
So I'm having the cool version of a chicken.
So you would go around terrorizing people.
Oh, talking point. I went to the big state fair this weekend,
Okay.
and I got licked by a cow. I fed a cow.
Oh, for God's sakes.
All
All right. Well, that's a good time to move on to the plugs, I think.
Yeah.
All right,
So-
I'll do them.
Plug man, go ahead.
I'll do them for the first time in 2 weeks. Okay, so DeviantArt, we are on DeviantArt. We are cutieartcrusaders.deviantart.com. We are also on the YouTube, which is youtube.com/cutieartcrusaders, I think. We are also on the Twitter, which is @cutieartcrusade, the Facebooks, and we are on the Tumblr, which is cutieartcrusaders.tumblr.com, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All those places.
And
also the email, which is cutieartcrusaders@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Is there anything
Yay.
else?
I think that's it.
Well, I think that's it for this episode. So, yeah, that's everything for this week. Do we have a theme for next week, or are we just gonna say meh?
We do, but we're not
gonna-
going to sell anyone.
Good answer. I like that answer. That works for me.
See, Joel has a theme, but he hasn't even told us. So
Yeah, the theme isn't actually to do with Cutie Art Crusaders at all. It's just a theme of what he's gonna do today. He does that sometimes.
Cleaning. It's a cleaning. It's a cleaning.
You heard it here. You heard it here first. You know what? I'm not even gonna make that joke because I can't speak. So
we're all having issues today.
we're done here, folks. We're done here. That's
yeah.
everything. Golden Oaks Library. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys pick apart the way that we say library, because I say library sometimes.
It's library.
Yes. I miss the second R sometimes.
Black February.
February.
February. Yeah.
February.
February. Fredberry.
All right, this episode has devolved.
Like a
Or is it-
dinosaur. I win.
We've just gone meta.
Okay. Well, that's everything for this week, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not sure if I did.
Wait.
It's been weird. What?
What do you call a blind dinosaur?
No, for God's sakes.
Do you think he saw us?
All right, well, that is everything for this week. Whether or not you're on the live stream or on YouTube, we love you all the same. My name is Rainbow Plasma.
I'm Guy317.
I'm Atmosaurus.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Rawr.